What's up, everybody? John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. Once I was reading The Death of Superman, I got compelled to read Supergirl, and of course, I got a nice half-price books deal on this, along with the Superman stuff. So I got volumes 1 through 3 of the Peter David era, and it's got this spine here. I've got matching spines. There's a fourth volume, and his run lasted, I think, 80 issues, somewhere around there. But I think only the first 40 actually got collected by DC, and apparently this line's canceled because that's what DC Collected Editions does. If you've ever looked at DC stuff, they really do not follow through on a lot of what they promise. A lot of the times their solicitations get canceled, and a lot of other times they just stop doing runs in the middle of things. Another one that I like a lot is Chuck Dixon's Robin, and Chuck Dixon's Robin they didn't finish off, and they just canceled producing. I think they did the same with his Bird of Prey. Very annoying. Well, they did that here also with Peter David's run, but we have a few volumes. I got into this. In Superman, Death of Superman, I was very confused. I saw her in the actual Death of Superman. Looks like Doomsday killed her. And she changed in this gelatinous goo or something like that. And I was like, what the heck? How did Supergirl do that? It wasn't really explained who Supergirl was in that volume. And as I read more of the Return of Superman and all that, I kind of got this vibe that she was not the original Supergirl. And so I researched into things, found out that's actually accurate. And so I'll go over a little of DC's Supergirl history here as I've been researching a lot of this. I've actually pretty much grabbed every collected edition of Supergirl so far that's out. So I'll do an overview of all of those at some point. Right now I'll just talk about kind of who this is. And all that. So she's not Kara Zor-El, who is the known Supergirl, Superman's cousin, who died in Crisis. But some strange alien organism called Matrix assumed the form of Supergirl, and that's what goes on here. Now in the Superman books, she was dating Lex Luthor, and she dumped him, and that was the end of that, and then Peter David's run starts. It starts with an all-new collector's item number 1, of course, and that's what this collects. We have Supergirl number 1 through 9, Supergirl Annual number 1, Supergirl Plus number 1, and Showcase 96 number 8, the story from that. All right, and here we go. This is a very weird, so this Matrix Shapeshifter Supergirl is featured throughout this entire deal. What's annoying about DC Collected Editions, and they've actually fixed this in the second volume, but you see this art here. They give you the cover art, but they actually don't tell you what issue it is. You kind of have to assume what the issue is itself. The first one, I believe, is the Showcase one, and it's got Supergirl just kind of quickly showing who she is, kind of in a hospital and doing her thing, and then it kind of starts over. It's just a very short story, and I think it's a prelude to the Supergirl series is what it was meant to be. Peter David wrote it. Sets up Supergirl as a good hero. You kind of know she's a hero. She's got this background, and she's this character, Linda Danvers, not to be confused with Carol Danvers from the Captain Marvel universe. I don't know who chose the name first, or if it's random or whatever. But you see Supergirl number 1. This would be her cover right here, but it is not actually listed as Supergirl number 1 in this volume. And in volume 2, what they do is they don't actually print the title stuff, but they print a little this is Supergirl number 1 cover. So you kind of know where you're at in the series, which is a little better. I wish they'd just print the whole thing, because I like it when they show the whole cover with the logo and then the, $1.25, because I love going back and seeing what comics cost at certain times. All right, so we get into this character of Danvers, Linda Danvers, and Supergirl has merged with her basically. And Gary Frank does the art here. I like his art okay. He gets into a little bit of some people do this with faces a lot. I call it gritty face. And when I see it a lot on women's faces, I don't enjoy it very much. He doesn't do it in every panel, but he's got a little bit of gritty face going on and everything through here. So got a little bit of a habit of that, but most of his art's okay. There's this weird demon guy who's kind of stalking her from her past. Turns out that this Linda Danvers girl was into the occult and into Satanism and things like that. There are pastors in the town who are I guess Supergirl's parents in here, are religious people, and she's got her friend who works at the hospital as the setup. Her father, quote unquote, which is Linda Danvers' father, and remember Supergirl is kind of merged, as I mentioned, with him, with Linda Danvers, that is a cop, and they have a rocky relationship. There's also this guy who, with his weird goatee, he's a reporter, reporting on weird stuff going on here. So demonic activity happens. Supergirl gets involved in it, and it kind of escalates from there. So this guy, this bad demon guy, seduced Linda Danvers and brought her into a cult before, and Supergirl's now sort of remembering those things, and he's trying to actually bring Supergirl into it all through his wily ways, and she's trying to come to terms with who she is and dealing with being Linda Danvers and all this. Demons come out, she fights the demons. It's very bizarre stuff. This is not what I imagined a Supergirl book would look like. I was really thinking of something almost kind of campy, I guess, with like just, a girl going through and beating up monsters or something, which I guess I got. But it's very different. There's a lot of personal drama in this. And so I wasn't quite prepared for it at start. A weird spell happens where the town gets blacked out and there's no sunlight, and everybody kind of goes berserk and into their basic, I guess, way that they are, and kind of evil, as you see Supergirl here. And it's actually being controlled by Gorilla Grodd. I actually know who Gorilla Grodd is, even though I haven't read much Superman mythos, because I've read a little bit of Gorilla Grodd before. He's got this little amulet gem thing or whatever that is causing all this to happen, and it came from our little homie here. So she becomes bad over the course of things, and then finally she breaks free of his spell, fights him off, and we have this weird supernatural. It almost feels like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, more than it feels like, I'd say, a superhero comic. Very bizarre. And we get back into it, and we have a weird one where there's this preacher, and he's now talking about the events that happened and all that, and trying to make money off of that, which Supergirl doesn't like very much. And he's a televangelist. They love to go off on that in the early 90s, televangelism. There was a Phil Collins song that made fun of it too. So it was a cultural zeitgeist thing at the time. Not that exciting. Now, I would have been annoyed by that because, I'm so sick of preachers and all that being portrayed as bad people. But there's an actual preacher in here who's like the town preacher, and he's not shown as, I would say, a huckster. So it shows the difference between, that whole televangelism, grifting and real preaching, which is actually, kind of nice contrast to have. So, and that's that. So we get a one-shot here, which I think is that Supergirl Plus, where this girl from the Shazam universe shows up. She's mad at her parents, so she disappears and goes out. I think the art on this one. I really liked whoever did this. Brett Blevins did the pencils, but I think he's got a very nice cartoony style art. It reminds me a little of Josh Howard, and little toned down Josh Howard, I guess, which I really like. I think it fits the Supergirl vibe, having this, simplistic, Saturday morning cartoon sort of lines, very thick inks and all that. Looks very nice. They team up together basically and fight, and it turns out that there's a cop who gets a little frisky with her secret identity, and she shows up and then gets a little vigilante on them. And then they have to actually navigate the politics of police and whether, they can actually talk about it, which is very, very, very interesting dynamic storyline. So little on the talky side, and I think a lot of this book's really on the talky side. It feels like, I know Peter David is a TV writer by trade, really, and it definitely feels like it's written like a TV show more than it is written like we better get to the action of comics. Different way of doing things. It works out pretty well for the most part. I'm engaged through most of it, and I find Peter David's dialogue, especially his banter, to be very fun for the most part. But the cop kind of regrets it at the end of that, and that's the end of that. And then we get a backup story here, which we just kind of see a day in the life of Linda Danvers, which, this was kind of meh, and the art wasn't quite as good on this one, as you can see. So kind of skimmed along on that before we get back to our real story. And in this one, this gal's come to town, and she's a scientist. I forget what her superhero name is, or supervillain name is, but this girl changes into this. She's a scientist. It's from the Superman mythos, and I haven't read that much Superman. And there's a lot of that throughout this run, where there's like the Superman mythos. And there's a backstory, B story going on where Danvers' mom's actually trying to set her up with somebody. And this guy's unrelated to that, but he comes into play later, who gets corrupted by a demon. Superman shows up, and then, pleads that this woman needs to stop trying to get revenge on this other woman because she ruined her idea of a career or whatever. And she eventually kind of acquiesces to that. So it's a very like, stop the fighting, you shouldn't get revenge. You really, should let the law handle it, kind of a moral of the story, which works out pretty good. I found this to be an awkwardly very weird shot of Danvers after Supergirl kind of changes back into her. Really didn't work out. I don't know what happened with the art there with Gary Frank, but oh well. Okay, so that was interesting. And then we get back into the demonic stuff again. It's like almost a one shot that kind of didn't matter that much, but they got Superman back into it, and then the demons are coming back. And this is where it gets really talky. So you see there's not much action whatsoever going on in here. And a lot of backstory with Danvers. We learn about her past and the occult stuff that she saw and kind of rebelled from her parents on. And Supergirl like really takes exception with the life. And she gets some weird package. And her mom sets her up on a blind date. And we keep hearing the guy's name is Aldrin. And he goes by Buzz, so he's Buzz Aldrin. And they actually ask about the astronaut. Peter David likes to put names into things like this, I've noticed. There's a side character earlier in the book called Loeb. And it's obviously a reference to Jeff Loeb. So there's that. And she's shocked to find out that that's the blind date. They have a whole issue where it's really a tense moment where he's just kind of like talking his demon crap. And she's sitting there listening to it the whole time, and she really obviously doesn't like it. And he's really just trolling her through the entire thing. It's very funny and very dark. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole issue of talking, so it's a little slow going on the pacing. And eventually the next issue, it kind of breaks down into a full-on fight where he just kind of blasts her out of there. And then the demons kind of all come out, and he deals with it, and that's the end of it. So at the end of it, it turns out that like it reset the day when she actually stopped all the demonic stuff. So nobody knows what happens in the town except for her. So they kind of think she's crazy and flaky because unsung hero. It kind of is an interesting end where it resolves, but it's like Supergirl obviously doesn't feel like she won very much. And then we get into this. This is, again, as I mentioned, there's no text showing what the stuff is or what issue it's supposed to be. But we get into the annual. This is the annual #1 at the end, and we get some weird science fiction story by Chuck Dixon, who I love, and Ron Wagner, where like there's this like Supergirl who's jacked into this thing, and it's like a mining planet or whatever, and this girl really takes the identity of Supergirl and then screws up the evil corporate people, which I kind of like. So this was fun, totally unrelated, totally inconsequential to the main storyline, weird. And then we get a weird futuristic storyline by Barbara and Carl Kessel, who was writing Superman at the time, with George Perez doing inks, which is interesting. And they're talking about whether Supergirl actually existed in the future or not. And we get kind of like this like girl power moment through here. It was just like, it's one of those annual stories that doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, little overly cartoony in not the good way that I showed you before, but in a way that kind of makes the story feel like it's not that serious. Chuck Dixon one was much better, but still, the annual stuff like really didn't impact or have any bearing on the Supergirl story. So overall, the Peter David storyline is actually picking up really well. I actually enjoyed the little break with the Marvel gal in the Supergirl Plus, and the Supergirl Annual was not so great. The art is kind of hit and miss. I mentioned that there's some weird facial expressions and weird panels that happen periodically with Gary Frank, but overall his storytelling's pretty good, so it kind of balances out on that front. I enjoyed it, and I am going to continue on to number 2. I'd say this is a solid 7.5 out of 10. So if 7's my average book, it's just a little bit better than average. But we will be reading volume 2 soon and getting back to this. I've also got those other Superman volumes that I have to review from the Death and Return of Superman. I don't know. I'm on a DC kick lately, and I don't really read a lot of DC, but maybe I'll change that. So we'll see. Tell me what you like. All right, hit that like and subscribe button. I can talk, and I will be back later. See you guys.